Well, good day. Just finished Einstein and the Rabbi twice. So good. Cannot recommend it more highly. Um, what did I? It's something not really worth mentioning before that. Currently reading Hannah Arendt on human nature. Could not recommend it more highly either. But I just thought I'd share. This is kind of cool. Um, this book here, not too long ago, it's only about 10 years old. This is the first edition. And it's pretty cool because it's, right, you can see sold in Canada. Right? It's nearly perfect, except for I think when it was donated to the thrift store that, the cover got ruined. The dust jacket, as it were, because there's a dent. But that's the only damage on this book. And the reason why I mention it is it seems completely unread. Right? So this is a wonderful book. It's called Ring of Steel. I actually have a book about. The reason why I noticed this is I have a book about the Krupp company, and I think it relates. But this here is about Germany and Austria-Hungary at war, obviously, 1914 to 1918. This is pretty important. If you know me, really into German philosophy. So this has some interest as it how they got there when it relates to some of the philosophers that I enjoy, and then philosophy after World War One. So you can actually differentiate before and after. There was a level of nihilism or uncertainty after Darwin and the German philosophers led us, right, Bismarck, and led us into the First World War. Then after, the amount of authors that were influenced by the Second World War, I apologize, by the First World War, Jung, for example, or Sassoon, or Graves. The list will just go on and on. But for me, most important is Jung, because arguably what he saw, as many of them did, what they saw in those intervening years of 14 to 18, what man can do to man, man's inhumanity to man, led us to the modern situation in more ways than one, but certainly influenced Jung and his black books, his journals, which eventually became his red book, which I cannot recommend more highly. I think it's a seminal text, sadly only published like just a couple of years before this one. But yeah, I thought I'd share this. It's pretty cool. I picked it up because it's a first edition. Right, there's been a paperback, I think, released to this. But the subject matter to me is pretty interesting, right? Because I mean, we're actually trying to have a discussion about this morning, and I just brought up the fact that not everyone agrees that some killing can be justified. Leo Tolstoy was excommunicated from the Orthodox Church for saying exactly that there is no justified killing. All of it is murder. And then I heard people arguing about this, trying to say that, there was justifiable murder. They were arguing about it being in the Bible, when in reality it was justified after the fact. They even wanted to talk about the Hebrew, but they completely ignored. It's talked about in Deuteronomy. It's talked about in Exodus. And Hebrew itself talks about, I won't bother, but the Hebrew itself talks about that it clearly states that this is not something that you want to do. In fact, there's even a mention killing someone accidentally. you would still be excommunicated from the community. There's even a section, I believe in Deuteronomy, that talks about what happens if you find someone who was killed accidentally or may have been murdered, but you don't know who did it. How do you handle that? And actually, it's a beautiful passage because it talks about how the community can get together and give this person and their family, last, like, closure, whatever you'd want to call it, but to take care of this body because of the particular rights at the time. But that's neither here nor there. I think it's beautiful to read how, in the absence of knowledge as to what happened to this individual, what takes precedence is not to go around and try to find out what happened and who did what and punish somebody. The main and first goal was to, take care of the victim and, um, possibly their family. Right? So this is why I find these books interesting, because for me, this may seem like it's connected to war, but it has absolutely nothing to do with war in my perspective. Same as reading Einstein and the Rabbi. I was attracted initially because, I'm a fan of Einstein. But in the end, this book, Einstein and the Rabbi, it's beautiful. It's kismet, because by accident I found Elie Wiesel, a great author about humanity. He gave a voice to the madness that was the dark times for the Holocaust, as it were. Just about everything I talk about is going to get me silenced on a platform here or there, right? But neither here nor there. It's a beautiful book because the reason why she wrote the book is she came across a letter that Einstein wrote to a rabbi. What becomes even more interesting is that rabbi was writing because he lost his son. And he was bereft, great word, just completely lost to grief. And what's amazing is this gentleman was at sea because he was working to help lost souls. And he was at sea again after saving countless souls. But the reason why the story is so touching is his son died of polio, while so many of other Jewish children died for other reasons. But this rabbi is famous because not only did he find over 900 orphan children at Buchenwald, they're called the Boys of Buchenwald. The story gets even more interesting because most people had given up on them. But this rabbi didn't. This is the same rabbi, as I said, brought, or did I even mention, Elie Wiesel to freedom, as well as he was the rabbi that brought, what's this sex therapist name? I can't remember her name, but he also escorted her as well, right? So you see the connections, right? Elie Wiesel, Einstein and the Rabbi, Ring of Steel, the war that led to another war, Hannah Arendt, and the banality of evil. That's really the lesson here. Is the only thing that is ever a surprise, or should be a surprise, is our penchant for ignoring our divinity. I find it funny as Elie Wiesel asked a Rabbi, who is essentially like an Orthodox Jewish mystic, and he asked him, "How can I believe in God after the Holocaust?" And the rabbi's response was, "How could you not?" And that's really where I find myself, is that in spite of having seen some horrible things and having been, you know, uh, disenfranchised in different ways, I find myself not at a loss um, to see the inherent humanity, the goodness of humanity. Even if it isn't a truth, I still hold it to be such. Um, Chesed, is really the takeaway, is to feel blessed, but also to take pride in what you create, even if that's a smile on somebody else's face. Right? The reason why I mention that is I have a friend who's a YouTuber, and he did a video talking about he was sad at how it's negative to call yourself a creator or a YouTuber. I mean, I find that terribly sad because I've said this before. It was originally the bio that I had for this channel before um, I changed it. I got a little blacklisted because I used to talk about some verboten subjects. But I used to talk about this struggle to understand oneself, but also Schatzen, what Nietzsche told us, that we are the evaluators. So our meaning is our creation, not just what we should find hope and faith in, right? Creation. But it's the reason why we're here, is to create. So to misunderstand commercial content from humanity as a content, that's a sad thing. That's what, actually, as a final, I'll just tell you a little story from Einstein and the Rabbi. That was my favorite. They talk about how the angels were jealous when they heard that God was going to create man in his image, in God's image. Pardon the pronouns. And so the angels were worried that we would supplant them in creation, right? It's just a story. Don't stress over the issues because, again, angel is simply a Hebrew word for messenger. So the messengers were worried that man might replace them. That's a common experience nowadays. So they all conspired to hide the image of God. And what's interesting is in Hebrew, the visage, the face, actually means what's on the inside as opposed to what's on the outside. But so they planned to hide the visage or the image of God, but they weren't sure where to hide it so that man wouldn't find it, so that humanity wouldn't find it. So they talked about putting it at a top mountain, but they feared that man might learn to climb mountains. The bottom of the sea, but they feared that man might learn to swim to the bottom of the ocean. So they decided to hide it where we would never look and probably never find. So they chose to hide the face of God, the image of God, the visage of God, the truth of God, the source. They chose to hide it in our soul, the last place that we would look. And I love that because that's Vedanta, that's Yogacara, that's Shaivism, right? Right. That's the letter that Einstein wrote, that the beauty of existence, the proof of divinity, is the beauty of existence. There's also another, I believe, Jewish saying that the job of divinity is to convince. I've talked about this before, the idea that this is more beautiful than heaven. I made the joke before, if heaven's so perfect, then it takes all the joy out of life. If you could bowl a perfect game every time, it's not special anymore. So it's our failing, our foibles. It's there's a term in Japanese called wabi-sabi, and off the top of my head, I can't remember if it's gilgul in Hebrew, but this idea of it's the imperfections that make things special. And that's, I think, what makes us special. It's the fact that we're winning or we're learning.